Well, hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give folks just a minute or two to get settled, to jump on, to check their audio, to get a glass of water, and then we'll go ahead and really kick things off. So sit tight, and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. If you're just joining us, welcome. We are about to get started with today's webinar. We're so glad you're here. We're just going to give folks a couple more seconds to get on, to get settled, to connect, and then we'll get started. So we'll be right with you. Okay, I think we should get going. Looks like our attendee list has stabilized. Thank you again for joining us. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. If you're here to hear about University of New Mexico's experience with Kuali Curriculum Management Catalog, you are in the right place. We'll start with a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, this session will be recorded. You probably noticed that when you joined. It will be available on demand. So if you want to watch it again or you want to share it with a colleague, you'll certainly be able to do that. All of our attendees are on mute, but we welcome your questions. You can go ahead and drop your questions into the Q&A box at any point, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. My name is Casey Foster. I'm with Kuali. I'm the EVP of Marketing and Sales Enablement. We've got two fabulous panelists with us today. I'll give them the opportunity to introduce themselves in just a minute. But before we do that, I want to give you a little bit of information about Kuali, the company, and about the software that we're going to talk about today, in case you're not familiar with us. If you are familiar with Kuali, you already know that we make amazing software for higher education. And the way we do that is deeply rooted in our community model. And in fact, community is at the forefront of my mind today because we just recently had our awesome annual users conference, Kuali Days, which was such a great opportunity to see our community in action. So community is at the forefront of my mind right now. But community really goes back to the roots of the beginning of the Kuali project, which started 2 decades ago when a small group of colleges and universities came together to solve two problems that they were facing acutely. The first problem was administrative software that did not meet their needs. It was not a good fit for higher education. It didn't solve the problems that they needed to be solved. The second problem was relationships with software vendors that did not feel like partnerships. So in order to solve those two problems, this small group of colleges and universities pooled their resources and came together and began to build administrative software. Along the way, many other schools joined that community, and the community grew. But as a decade moved forward, sentiment was changing, things were changing, the way that schools wanted to consume software was changing, and software as a service was moving to the forefront as a strategy, and the foundation was not well equipped to actually host and deliver software to its member institutions. So they made the decision to invest in and create the company Kuali. Today, Kuali is a software as a service company fully responsible for the design, development, and delivery of the software. But we've carried with us that spirit of community and partnership that was so core to the founding of the Kuali project. Since the formation of the company, we've grown considerably. There are now more than 230 schools that are using Kuali software across all of our product families. It's an exciting time to be part of the Kuali community because we have just relaunched many of our products on our brand new innovative platform. We've got a newly redesigned version of many of our software solutions, and we're very excited about that. Of course, we're here today to focus on our solutions for the Provost and Registrar. In particular, we're going to talk about curriculum management and academic catalog and the University of New Mexico's experience with those products. But I do want to take the opportunity to mention our new offering, syllabus management, which we're excited about. And of course, Kuali Build, our no-code forms and workflow process automation tool, which allows you to replace PDFs, digitize your processes in a way that's safe and secure that your IT folks will approve of. So with that introduction to Kuali, I want to turn our attention to our fabulous panelists at the University of New Mexico. I'm going to stop sharing. Michael and Ron, thank you so much for being here today. Would you be willing to introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about your roles at the university?
Sure. My name is Michael Raine. I'm the Associate Registrar for Curriculum, Catalog, and Residency. I was the functional lead on the implementation of the Kuali products. And so I'm here to talk about that.
My name is Ron Estrada, and I am with UNM's what we call Central IT, and I am a specialist in the area I focus on is integrations, and so my role is integration architect.
Oh, great, thank you. I know integrations are a hot topic, so I'm sure we'll dive into that. But for now, how about we go back in time? We'll get in the time machine. You don't want to, but we will. We're going to go back in time. Tell us what things were like before you implemented curriculum management and catalog. What challenges were you facing? What led you to pursue a solution in the first place?
So when I joined UNM, the process that was in place was really three different processes, and they were all manual. So in the first process, the curriculum workflow process was designed by some graduate students, and it used a cold fusion software, which isn't really supported any longer. And basically what I had was a long list of forms, and I had no idea where they were. So I'd have to click on every form to either return it somewhere or move it forward. So one year I had 900 forms, so I was touching each form multiple times manually. And so you can imagine that was my life, just looking at this list, clicking a form, hoping it had done something. Then the catalog part was completely separate. There was no integration between when a form received its final, let's say a course received its final approval and where it showed up in the catalog. That was done in Cascade. Now, Cascade's a web-based software, but it's not really designed to handle a 1,000-page catalog. It gets very cumbersome. And again, that was a manual process. So going from one to another, just by definition, introduces the possibility of error. But also, I'm duplicating work again, right? Well, then the final piece is none of that was connected to Banner, which is our software. So again, I was manually taking anything from the curriculum long list of forms that were approved and manually updating all of the forms and tables in Banner, which of course introduces a third possibility of error. And that meant one of the things that meant was that our catalog was published very late in the summer, unlike the rest of the institutions in the state, and also made it problematic for VA certification. And so I was determined to find a solution for it. I know people previously had looked for solutions. I fortunately got a new associate provost who was in charge of curriculum, and I went to her with a big binder saying, this is the process. We might want to change it. And she got on board with it. And I shifted the focus. I work in enrollment management. So we shifted the focus of who's going to pay for it from enrollment management to the provost office and faculty. And that was a good strategy because after we did all our RFPs, I think we found a very efficient and economical solution. Mm-hmm. So anyway, now I don't have manual work. It's all automated. It goes and builds a catalog when courses or programs or other forms are approved. and the courses get billed automatically into Banner. So,
That is great.
yes.
Thanks for sharing that. And I'll definitely have a few more questions about the current state as we move forward, but just sticking with the challenges that you were facing kind of before you made this transition. You mentioned the 900 forms. Those were course proposal, course approval forms, similar
Exactly.
to that.
Program approvals.
Right. Was there a challenge where people would want to know, like, has this been approved? Where is this in the process? What's the status? Were people calling you about that, emailing you?
Basically, everything was a challenge. On those particular forms, nothing was required except for the faculty name. So if they didn't upload a syllabus, which is required by curriculum committees, I would have to get in touch with them saying you need to upload a syllabus or send it to me to upload, that sort of thing. So the fact that we had no control over what had to be put into, what information had to be put into the course or program form meant that a lot of the time was spent backtracking. And there was no efficient communication model. It was basically a series of manually creating emails to say, hey, I need this. Then I had to manually transfer over. So, it's just thousands of hours of really inefficient use of time and a lot of back and forth. I would say that was an inefficient way of doing back and forth because they were no longer responsible for making updates to the form. I had to make those updates, right?
Right. So that comes to you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Ron, what was your perception of the challenges you were facing before? Did these things impact your work as well?
Not so much for current state as we know it. We were managing a different group was managing the processes Michael was describing. So for them, it was a significant upkeep of a few systems, in particular that Cascade. We had built some customization into it to, it was an XML based tool for content management, and we did some acrobatics to turn that into an automated catalog builder. But there was a business cycle processing that was pretty time intensive and needed a lot of onboarding and management and processing time. And so it was just a particularly fragile sequence of events for catalog. And then on our course management, we had an intermediary system that we had to, duplicate enter criteria, one to manage the workflow pieces. And so that meant, a whole stack of technologies to maintain and keep up to date. That also was a factor in the decision. So not wanting to have, being able to move to a SaaS system was important. And so for us, as an apps development team, our effort didn't kick in until the integration came around. So, but that kind of describes the technology behind what current state.
Right. The sort of state at the time. Okay, so it's time to look for a new system. What were you looking for? What were your requirements? What was at the top of the list?
No longer managing forms manually.
No manual processes, right.
Basically, the top of the list was an integrated curriculum workflow and catalog. The integration piece with Banner became part of that as we decided to do that piece. But the curriculum approval and catalog creation was the top criteria. Something I felt modern. I have been around enough institutions that I see that we get stuck with obsolete software, and I didn't want to have any part of that. And I wanted something that was cost effective, right? And I didn't want to burden the university with a huge yearly fee of, for something that once it was in place would just flow smoothly. So those are my criteria. Also, I would say part of my modern criteria was that it was a user-friendly, user-accessible interface. It's something that if you looked at it, it was intuitive, you would just know how to work with it. Or pretty well know how to work with it once you got the old system out of your system.
Right. Once you made that transition. Ron, did you have technical requirements at the forefront of your mind when you were kicking off the search, or not so much?
Yeah, I think SaaS was a high priority. Also integration, having the ability to have modern integration touch points. I think file-based uploads had been a standard that we were trying to not, paint ourselves into a corner with the technology. So we wanted something that would allow for some flexibility into also making our integrations modern. And then lastly was to make sure that workflow was part of the application so that we could sunset one of the applications that we were standing up for the group.
Okay, thanks. That all makes sense. So then what led you to Kuali? What was the process of discovering Kuali, and then ultimately why did you choose Kuali?
I saw Kuali demonstrated at a ACRO meeting maybe 10 years ago. It was kind of one of those things where I saw something that I knew was different and something I could understand, right? So that just was something that has stayed with me. Coming to UNM was the first opportunity to advocate for something. And after we went through the RFP process and reviewed 3 vendors, and I think we all felt that the criteria that I had talked about earlier were met by Kuali, and I think the IT group felt the same, but they will speak for himself on that. So again, it has to do with kind of just the beauty of the software. It has to do with the user experience of the software. It had to do with the flexibility that I have with the forms and the workflow in the software. And then finally the integration piece. So that, now I spend more time thinking about what's before me so I can help deal with errors that have been made by people before they get to curriculum committee approval. I spend more time helping faculty with designing programs or courses or, those kinds of issues than I do just manually, blindly pushing something along.
Right. A much better use of your professional skills and experience. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Ron, from your perspective, what were the things that made Kuali the right choice?
The sys connector, and then the availability of resources to complete the integration from Kuali's end. So that was something that just stood out, having another team helping with making sure that the connection was completed. So and also the usability, I think, for the seeing what it looked like, the underlying architecture, it got our, I guess, it shined the brightest in our RFP process.
That's great to hear. I'm so glad. All right. Well, let's sort of move forward in time. So you've made your selection. What was the onboarding and implementation experience like, both functionally and technically?
Functionally, you make a lot of decisions that you didn't know you had to make, you know.
Right.
It's kind of like getting married and suddenly you have a million details that you just never thought about. So, and you don't, until it's done, you don't know what you needed to add, kind of. But the positive side of that is that's not a problem because that can be added or changed or whatever. So it was, you know, going detail by detail on our current forms. This is what's required in the curriculum process, approval process, and making those forms actually required so that somebody proposing a form can't do anything without all those fields filled in.
Right.
Without
So it reaches you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So that in of itself eliminated, you know, 90% of the issues. And then going along and the curriculum committees saying, well, we want some other things added that need to be required. And so being able to do that, right? So that piece of it was relatively straightforward in the sense that we already had templates to work from, right? We had our current forms and we had our current workflow process. But with Kuali, we suddenly had the ability to add a lot of steps in that workflow process to make it more efficient in a way. So for example, when a course goes through approval, we have a step that automatically notifies our degree audit people that this course has been approved. Or we have a step that goes for approval for someone who works with our higher ed department, notifying them that this is a new program and it needs to be certified by the state or whatever it is. And as people found out that we had this flexibility, more and more people wanted approval steps for their own particular school or program. And there was no problem, right? It was easy to do. And I, most importantly, wasn't manually moving them there, right? It was automatically happening. Every approval step just automatically moves the form to the next step. And so the efficiency, you know, you could go really within a few weeks if everything were fine. Of course, could be totally approved or a program could be completely approved. And then we could process it and have it in for the next catalog. So those parts were relatively straightforward because we had templates to work from. Everybody's going to have those templates. And then you see where, oh, we can add things to it because now it makes sense, right? The integration with Banner was, well, Banner has a lot of tables. And as Ron will tell you, we had to have a correlation between what's on the form with those tables in Banner, right? So that was a lot of the work that came a little bit later of working on that integration piece, making sure that we covered all the bases and all the possibilities. I mean, if you just look at your grade options, you know, you might have a list of 10 different grade options. So having the form have the table that matches the table in Banner. And that was probably the more of the heavy lifting, I think, from our side, but mostly, especially from Ron's side. And he did a beautiful job of it.
What was that experience like from your perspective, just getting everything set up and getting that integration in place? And I should say, I think integration is really of interest. I think there might be folks attending this webinar who are evaluating and thinking through how they might approach this type of project. So I'd love to hear you talk through kind of how you approached it.
Yeah, so that early form building phase was quiet for us, but the collaboration between the two project managers, we had our project manager coordinating with Kuali's project manager. That was pretty convenient and really efficient, and the usage of time seemed seemed dialed in as well. So by the time we were doing integration work, I think that a lot of the design had been worked out. So like Michael said, at the point, it was just a matter of it mapping and then kind of designing what our course structure grew to be in Kuali and mapping that to what it needed to be in our SIS. And I think the only thing that I probably would recommend, it worked out well for us, and likely because we had such strong knowledge of the banner system, is that you have that we would have been included in the form design. So I think that probably would have been somewhat helpful. And other than that, it was a nice transition of, okay, we are ready to test this course approval process out. And then for the catalog side, there wasn't much integration work, but we did have some data loads. So initial data loads. What they did on the form really helped us in the back end clean out and organize our data in a way that was probably due. So while the forms were being designed, we were able to learn more about what our data needed to look like going into it, and from SIS to Kuali. And so that really helped us find dirty data and then get that cleaned up and dialed in for upload. So yeah, and then we had our initial data loads that were pretty seamless for us. So surprisingly, it's a really straightforward process with the way the technical team facilitated mapping sessions and how being really flexible with working with data, also doing a lot of the work with us, which was very helpful.
I would add that you also, if you're going to integrate, you need to make decisions about what to integrate or not. So we chose not to integrate prerequisites. I think Ron would still be working on it, to do that. And so that's really the only manual work that we have, is after a course is approved, is making sure that the prerequisites are in Banner. They do show up in the catalog, so that part we don't even have to worry about. So it's just making sure.
We also made a decision about the how far back to go for data. So
right, yes.
Some of our state requirements were, keep this course around, or it has some transitional state after 6 years, and so we chose 6 years as the kind of baseline for what data to pull in.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I've got kind of two follow-up questions to that. First of all, you've talked a lot about the decisions that you need to make. Those are a key part of really the success of any implementation. What was the group that helped you make those decisions? Was it just the two of you? Did you have an expanded group? That's sort of my first follow-up to that.
We actually had a large oversight group that met occasionally, so we could tell them what our practice was. We had a project manager in which she kind of pulled together a group to talk through various things. And then a lot of it was, of course, just one-on-one work. So I think there were at least 3 levels. I think Ron might add to that.
Yeah, just we have a data stewardship group, and then we had some SMEs, some subject matter experts that really helped us recognize data that was going to be essential, and then also structuring that data so that it was flexible enough to be an interface, an integration interface that wasn't so banner centric, that it was just a data upload. So we kind of spent a lot of time on learning what the configuration was trying to represent, and then giving ourselves a little bit of flexibility for kind of something more serviceable than just point to point.
And one way we did that was, I guess it was the IT stewardship group decided that Kuali for courses would be the record source, not Banner. So that's really where I think a lot of that came from.
Okay, thank you. So my next follow-up to that is about training to campus or rolling out to campus. How did you approach that? What kind of training was needed? How did you, I see you smiling. It feels like there's a story there.
So we winged it. No.
You just winged it. Right, what better way?
We set up series of online seminars essentially that people could join to take us through the beginning and, you know, of signing into Kuali, getting a user account, what the various forms look like. We also did one-on-one trainings, and then we have online, we videoed trainings for a lot of the various kind of basic processes, as well as links to Kuali's resources in terms of trainings. And so I think that part went really well. It got well, I never received any negative feedback, and the provost didn't either. And I can tell, you know, even now, if somebody doesn't really know what they're doing, I just say, you know, let's just meet online and we'll go through it, you know, and I'll show them how I would build their program versus how they're doing it, sort of thing. And I think that's Kuali lends itself to making it kind of a personal experience that way. You know, you're not, you know, it's a friendly looking, inviting kind of experience. And so that's what we have that's still in place actually. So, you know, it's kind of just ongoing, and it just sits there ready to be used.
It's great. That's what it's meant to do. All right. So we've gone through the process of kind of how you got live, which is awesome. What efficiencies have been achieved? How would you describe the transformation? And you've alluded to some of this already, but share kind of the big things that have changed.
Well, you know, thousands of hours have changed.
Love that. Thousands
for everybody,
of hours.
You know, for faculty, for approvers, for myself. Also behind that, you know, even now occasionally I'll go into Banner just to make sure that things float over. Never a problem, right? So, you know, you get this sense of security with, you know, being able to depend on what's happening. I would also say that Kuali's help desk is phenomenal. I would say I get acknowledgement within a few minutes, and I'll get a response usually within 30 minutes responding. And, you know, most of the issues have to do with my own inexperience versus anything intrinsic to Kuali. And so, you know, if there's an error, it's because it was introduced by me, basically. And it's all fixable. I mean, that's the other thing I haven't encountered, something that wasn't fixable. So there's security from that point of view, that the help ticket system and all of the documentation you have online really makes you feel confident in the entire process, you know. So I think those are some of the biggest differences. I never felt confident in the previous system between the manual curriculum workflow, the catalog, and Banner. So
right. so many opportunities for manual error, as you pointed out, with that much rekeying.
Exactly.
Thousands of hours is an extraordinary amount of time saved, and that is so exciting for us to hear.
I'll give you one example. I mean, I'll be
Yeah.
publishing the catalog on Friday, which is about 2 months early.
Mm-hmm.
I would have had one of the IT team spend 2 solid weeks trying to extract a catalog from Cascade. And I'm going to send them an email on Friday saying, hey, Steve, you're not doing anything right now. Because his team actually that's not on their plate anymore. They can go on to more useful projects.
That's great. So that time savings hasn't just been you in your office,
yeah.
It affects IT and others as well.
IT has nothing to do with the upkeep of the Kuali software, as far as I know. I mean, it's, there's no interaction there. They occasionally get some error messages and we realize that it was me. But yeah, we freed up time that had to really across the whole university, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Ron, do you have anything to add there just in terms of the current state of things, efficiencies achieved, anything on that topic?
Yeah, I think from a technical perspective, the integration that we built out was a homegrown integration for the SIS banner. So we weren't, for whatever reasons, we weren't able to use Ethos. Nothing technical, just our current state didn't allow us to. So we worked at the database level, so using PL SQL and building out our own interfaces through their database APIs, there being solutions. And so I think that we were worried and kind of cautious about building that out. And so far it's worked out fairly well. So I think we're still looking at the Ethos platform as a way to integrate, but for now, just that's probably an important piece of information for anyone wanting to integrate. Our banner configuration wasn't quite ready for a modern integration technology, and so we somewhat created it, and that was helpful.
Okay. Well, that is great and useful piece of information. There are a couple questions that I want to get to, and I just want to remind our attendees that if you've got questions, you can drop them in the Q&A, and we'll be happy to take them, or as many of them as we're able to. One question that we have is, and I think I know the answer to this, but how much technical assistance from Kuali did you need? It sounds like you were pretty well equipped to develop this integration.
It's a good question. I don't have anything to compare it to other than we've never had the teamwork. It felt like an extension of our development team. Mm-hmm. So that resource, that was just that's probably unique. So it seems unfair to share that, because it's like, well, we just had an extension of our team, but if that's obviously a piece of the product that you provide, and that made things, how to measure that is tough, because everything from the endpoint back to Kuali, your developer was able to develop and support and maintain even now. So everything to our endpoint was our responsibility, and making sure that those synced up was a team effort. So I would nearly say 45, 65, or whatever that 55, 45, 55.
Great, thanks. Another question is, you had mentioned, Michael, earlier, some of the decisions that you had to make, and maybe you didn't quite realize that you had to make them, or maybe realize the impact of those decisions. And I think that's part of any big software implementation. Do you have an example of like one of those and kind of how you rethought it and changed it?
I'm thinking because
Yeah.
in a way, all of it, there's a way in which all of it was that way. And a lot of it comes from, we had a basic template that we worked from. What you realize very quickly when it's so manual like that is that template is very thin, doesn't have a lot to it. And if you can have a system where you increased, like on our form now, we require that they put student learning outcomes on the form. Never had that before, right? So we now are gathering a database of syllabi and student learning outcomes on these course forms. We never had that possibility before. The thing that's probably not talked about enough is that every single line that you have on any form is reportable in Kuali. So at some point, the provost or the dean wants to see all the student learning outcomes, we could run a report, or they can run a report, and there they are. So if I had known, I think that I had that ability to report on everything, I would have had more things up front, right? Like zip codes and all the degree things. They came later because we had, as Ron had mentioned, we had this massive download of courses. Over 6,000, nearly 7,000 courses were uploaded into Kuali, which they don't have a lot of that information in there yet because they haven't gone through the approval process. They're fine as they are. So I would have maybe approached some of that a little differently, a little more upfront, realizing, oh, this is kind of information we want to be able to gather. Let's put that information in the form, or add that information. Yeah.
Right. It's amazing when you suddenly have access to data, suddenly new possibilities occur to you, and that leads to new ideas about what you might be able to capture and want to capture. So
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And thank you for sharing all of this information. One other question has to do with business process change. So you mentioned that you transferred a lot of your kind of form templates, you leveraged those. Did you make any significant business process changes as part of the implementation or not so much?
Yeah, we did, in a way that we have 4 branch campuses. And in the past, they were not really included in the process very well. So now they have their own branch campus committee that their forms go through to get approval, and then it rejoins the workflow. So things like that were not part of the previous process. We have a lot of interaction with our state on our lower division courses. And before, that was like, a separate email, separate folder on my computer. Now that's part of Kuali, where the forms are uploaded, and we have an approval step for that. So I send it off to the state, and I write down the application number from the state in my comments on the form. And then when it gets back, I write down that was approved, and then I can forward. So a lot of things became, whereas I was having emails and folders and trying to juggle, various different things, now it's all in one place.
That is great to hear. Thank you. My question is, what's your favorite feature or features of the software?
Believe me, going from the old system to this system, everything's my favorite feature. And I'm not even joking about that. one feature I do like, because I use it a lot, is there's the comment feature within a form, right? So there can be a dialogue with the person that proposed the form, with the provost, and all kinds of people. But there is one feature of that comment that if you do a separate comment, you can allow somebody to edit the form while it's in your queue. So you're not actually sending it back. Let's say there's this really trivial update or change that is required. You can send them a comment saying, you know, this is needed, you can do it, and you're not resubmitting it, you're just making an update right there, and then I can look at it, approve it, and move it on. And that's a big time saver. Because when you send it back through workflow, you may be sending it back through 4 other people that have to look at it again when it's not really needed. So that's probably my super duper favorite feature.
That's great. Thanks, Ron. Anything on the technical side?
Just the event publishing. It does all the work for us. So sysconnectors, it's great.
Awesome. Well, last call for questions from our attendees. If there's something that you want to ask, don't hesitate to drop it into the Q&A. I think my final question, barring any others that come in, would be what advice do you have for folks out there who are thinking about choosing curriculum management catalog software? What would you recommend they think about as part of that process?
For me, it would be look at your price point and what you're getting for that price point, because there's a lot of curriculum management products out there. And I initially liked, like I said, I saw Kuali at least 10 years ago, and I initially liked it because it was a consortium of universities, right? And that meant that, to me, universities supporting each other and that community, like, because we're not in competition, like, you know, if you find something that really works, you know, I'd like to support it. And so I think that that's the biggest thing, is just, you know, compare what you're getting, and from the user experience, what you're getting for what you're paying.
Thanks, that's great. Anything to add, Ron, to that?
The API library is substantial and neat, so it's cleanly done. So it's a modern integratable technology that is just it works as designed. So I think that was in the higher ed arena. That's surprisingly it shouldn't shine as bright as it does, but that's a highlight.
Oh, that's great. I'm so happy to hear that. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for taking the time to talk with us and with our attendees today. I'm really grateful. And then go ahead and share my screen. Just one more time to let folks know that if you're attending and you want to get some more information about our curriculum management, catalog products, or really anything else that Kuali can do for you, please visit our website, which is kuali.co. You can also reach out to me directly, casey@kuali.co, and I'll get your inquiry to the right person who can help answer your question. So with that, thank you both so much. Thank you to our attendees. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.